I'm here with Rachel Presser. She's the founder of Sonic Toad Media and Consulting. She's a regular blogger on Gamer Sutra, and she's a real business brain for the independent games community. She was a tax advisor and has written books about that. She ran Himalaya Studios and was CFO, so she understands the balance between creative and commercial. I'm really excited to have her speaking with us today. She's going to be talking about networking. Welcome, Rachel. It's great to have you here.
So thanks for having me on. Yes, so I'm helping interview people for the summit, but now today I'm the one being interviewed.
Yeah, fantastic. We've really been taken with your your knowledge and your skills and your care about the independent developer. So I'm really looking forward to tackling the area of networking today. You're the only person speaking on that topic, so it's really interesting for me and for us to dive in. And so thank you very much for being here. And can I ask at first, what's networking done for you in your life and career?
Well, networking is what's basically taken me from where I was to where I am today. And that's also like just like how I broke down a lot of the misconceptions about about entrepreneurship, just about like going your own way, when the whole because I said, like in my case, Sonic Toad was initially formed because the whole have a job while you work on the game deal did not work for me for various reasons. So Sonic Toad was formed because of the whole have a job while you work on the game deal didn't work out, and I had a lot of misconceptions about going indie, about having my own business, self-employment in general, and definitely about networking. And what really prompted me to write the piece on Gama Sutra, where it's just that we're given a lot of misconceptions about networking, because people hear the word network and they get this idea in their heads of like, oh, like we're going to one of those events that's advertised as a networking event where everyone is just awkwardly standing around a room, giving out business cards, and they're just like desperately trying not to come off as a hard sell or somebody begging for a job. And that's like the kind of misconception that I was given about networking, especially like when I was in college. Like I went to, as I mentioned in my article, I'm a graduate of public university. I did not have a lot of major opportunities for networking there, for various reasons, but also career services department, that was where I had to go for help because my father, worked in the same public service job like his entire career. Like he hadn't had to look for a job, in decades. And then when it was my turn, when I graduated high school, it was time for me to start, looking for a job. And then, both like, a retail or service job. And then when I got older, looking for that first professional job, like he also like career services. He meant well, but couldn't help me because he had no idea what it was like, just, like in the modern landscape at all. Like when I was graduating college a little under, a decade ago, like things like Twitter and LinkedIn, all these other new sites and apps we have now meant for professional networking, like they were all these shiny new toys. Like it's not like, today you can go to like any given college campus, public or private, and they'll actually have like seminars or like weekend workshops about, oh, here's how to make a really good LinkedIn profiles. Here's what you can do to land a job, like through social media or whatever. Like this was all a while yonder when I was college age. So I definitely did not have the advantage of good networking resources. And then when I went to networking events at school, that's when I was still in the financial industry. I did have the advantage of already having a job in that industry, which I got through Craigslist. I did not get that with the help of my school. I had to learn how to do all that shit on my own because I said they meant well, but they couldn't help me. And I just remember though, like being instructed about like how to conduct yourself around these recruiters, around these people who may be offering you jobs. I said it was all just so stiff and formal, and like everyone is trying not to come off as thirsty as fuck because you have a bunch of these like starving college kids and like middle management people. Because I had a lot of older people in my classes. I went to Lehman up here in the Bronx. You'll find younger folk, but I mostly have people in their 40s and 50s in my classes. So you had these like, you had a lot of like, yeah, like either like women who used to be like housewives now training to get a job that no longer exists, like these hungry middle managers who got laid off. That's like what all my classes were full of. And they're competing with the fresh-faced college kids. And everyone is just like stiffly interacting with all these recruiters, trying not to come off thirsty. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, this is networking. This is hell. Oh my God, why do people do this? And so networking, I mean, I just think that is something you have to like redefine and drop that conception of it that I just described. And you basically have two tenets: don't come off thirsty and just talk to people. And I found that I had far more success with that approach than I did when I was a thirsty college student. And then later on, almost a decade later, a thirsty financial professional who was out of a fucking job. So talking to people, just you just go to to like an event, or even just in like your daily life, you're just shooting the shit with people. You're not coming off as thirsty. You're not coming off as like a hard sell. And people, don't get that feeling that like you're desperate for a job or that you're desperate to sell something. And it makes them want to actually reciprocate with you. So that's like the first half of it.
Yeah, that's great.
The second half of it, though, that I didn't really get into in the Gama Sutra piece, because there was already so much to get into as it was. But the next part of networking, though, is that it's a long game. It's a long game in that you're not, instead of like looking to get, an immediate payoff from it, because that's the other thing, too, that like we were also taught about networking when I was, in college, was that like, oh yeah, you need a job right away, or you need a gig right away. You better start networking right this second. Networking is kind of a long game in that you really have no idea who's going to contact you for something immediately, who's going to, not need your services until months or even years from now. And you never know, too, if that person you're speaking with is going to also help you out in some way. Let me give you a good example of this, because this is what, I like good, solid, real-life examples. You also can't think of it solely in terms of, like what you do for a living, services like that you need, knowledge bases that you need. You can't solely look at it that way. Like I mentioned in my Gama Sutra piece, like I talked about communities and hobbies, places that you go, like places you frequent, in your own community. So my community here in the Bronx is, pretty diverse. You got an interesting bunch of people here, and I'm starting to see more entrepreneurial types in this neighborhood. And like I was just, like at the diner one day after the gym, and I'm just chilling at the counter, and then the gentleman next to me, just like struck up a conversation. And so like, he heads like some church group, and I'm an atheist, but whatever, I respect that. But no, he also does like some kind of like thing for entrepreneurs in the Bronx, particularly for people who've been incarcerated and they have a hard time starting again. And that's definitely a project that aligns with my values. So I agreed to exchange contact information. Yeah, then like a couple months later, I actually wound up like doing a workshop with him. So you never know when things like that, can come up. Another good example, though, for something unrelated to what you do for a living. I mean, because I teach business courses. That is one of the services Sonic Toad Consulting offers. But one thing that's unrelated, though, for a totally like personal matter, was one of the coffee shops that I like to work out of down in Manhattan. I was just working one day, and then some guy sitting at the table at the same table as me, was just commenting on my hair color. It always gets commentary often. Little random fact, my hair is blue because, not just because it's a nice color, it's because toads can see it. Because I'm a crazy toad lady and I want toads to see me. Anyway, so he's just commenting on my hair color, silly because his daughter was going for a similar shade. And then we start chatting. So he's, so basically he's an insurance, salesman. And, he has a regular job. He's not looking to go freelance. So I can't sell consulting services there. He's already got a marketing department at work. I can't sell my services there either. But we traded contact info just because the guy was like genuinely hilarious. And he just said, hey, well, if I ever know anyone who needs your services, yeah, I'll hit you up. I gave him some of my stickers, my cards. But then a couple months later, the construction on my building started. And that was a hellish period of like about, I think, around 8 months or so. It was impossible to work here. And then a bunch of shit in my apartment like wound up actually like breaking because of that construction. And I had to figure out what the building was responsible for and then like what my homeowner's insurance was supposed to cover. And I'm like, oh crap, is this thing gonna like go up now? Like, this is not even my fault. And I was freaking out. I had all these questions, but then I remembered something. Now I could call the guy who sold me my homeowner's insurance policy. What's he gonna do? He's gonna try to sell me more fucking insurance, which I don't want and don't need. Or I could call the guy who I had a friendly conversation with and then be like, hey, we just, chatted as people. And then he gave me a very like thorough breakdown of like all the things I had, all the questions I had about my policy and also like stuff I should look for if I'm going to consider a new policy. And that's the beauty of networking. It's not always about a financial exchange or like someone's going to give you work or give you a job. It's also about like, how can you help each other? And wouldn't you rather have an expert you can ask about something instead of, someone, who's going to try to sell you something, which is this situation, or being at the mercy of search engines. That's another big thing people overlook with networking. And if I didn't have all these like random experts I've met, in my field, out of my field, I would definitely not be where I am now.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's great. So really you're saying build an authentic relationship with these people.
Exactly.
It's much easier to not come across as thirsty if you genuinely care and you genuinely build a real relationship. And then you'll find a way to contribute to each other. Are there specific qualities that people have in the games business? What do you look for and what do you get to know when you meet people in this field?
Well, I mainly want to know what their end goal is, if they have one. You don't have to necessarily have an end goal right this second. But no, because a lot of people tend to see, I'm actually working on a blog post about this, which should be done by the time of publishing. It's not necessarily about game development in particular. I have another piece I'm going to work on for Gama Sutra after GDC is over. It is about different types of game careers and about how I gave up on the pressure of trying to be a full-time game dev. Because that's a whole other thing, which has it's in the same vein as entrepreneurship not being a monolith. Because it is a misconception that I think a lot of people have, and that they tend to get this idea in their head that, oh, if I'm going to start, my own business or I'm going to go freelance, that this is all I'm doing with my life. This is all I'm doing with my time. This is how I have to make money. If I'm going to have a company, oh, I need to be making X amount of dollars or offering, this kind of product or service. I have to, be growing this thing and hiring employees and making all these investments, getting capital. Guess what? You don't have to do any of that shit. You don't have to. You may just need some time to figure out what you want. You need some guidance. Shameless plug. I have a Clarity line for this, clarity.fm/SonicToad. I can help you figure that out. Because, I initially was going to go the path of getting investor funding, building a studio. But then I discovered that actually, no, I don't want to be a full-time developer because of networking, because of online, offline, the random adventures that I've had, and just in being authentic and talking to people. Because, when you talk to people and you're just trying to push, like what you're doing or what you're looking for, people can usually tell. They can usually tell, and it's very off-putting. It's extremely off-putting. Like thinking back, to like those job fairs, like those really stodgy, like kind of networking events I attended when I was in college, then a little bit in grad school. Like thinking about all of that, like it was just always like so obvious also who had the power in that kind of dynamic. And that's actually a separate concept in and of itself, in that because like one thing that like that you also put yourself at risk for when you come off as thirsty in a networking situation is you also put yourself at severe risk for exploitation if you're really coming off as desperate for a job. I know I did and that's how, I mean, that was one reason I got severely underpaid when I was still in finance, because I was just like, crap, I need a job now, or I need that first job to get my foot in the door. Hire me for God's sake. And so that's where I also got into in the Gama Sutra piece, was that when what you're selling is hire me for crying out loud, you're basically only sending a message of, hey, whatever skills I have, you can exploit them for some very like stupidly low amount of money, and you don't want to do that. But here's the thing though, passion sells, authenticity sells, and you also don't want to give the impression that you have zero bargaining power. And that's where also like I think that I know this takes a while, to build up, takes a while to get there, and you can practice that just by talking to people. I know that can be a challenge, like if you're more introverted, and then you can just start with like a small group or something, like find like a meetup.com group where like you don't have to like work the room, so to speak. Like start with something little, and then where you can build up some kind of like regular presence, and then because then those people remember you, they trust you, they know what you specialize in, they know like how you can specifically help them out. But I still ultimately think of like making friends, making contacts, opposed to making connections. And that's the part where I think a lot of people trip up when it comes to networking, because you're only thinking in the short game of a connection, opposed to a colleague, opposed to somebody you can contact regularly, whether it's related, as I said, to your career, or not, like the homeowner's insurance thing I was discussing.
Yeah, that's great. So what you're saying is play the long game, and
Yep.
I found that in this business of being in it for 20 years, that I still know people that I met around at the start, and you never know when you're going to help each other out. You never know when you're going to come across each other again. It's a kind of
Exactly.
a small industry. When you talk about, starting small so that, independents can find their feet communication wise, is that like starting a small group, like with playcrafting? Can you tell us about your playcrafting experience a little bit?
Oh, sure. Because it's funny you mentioned playcrafting, because that started as a meetup.com group, actually. Back in I think it was, I started coming in 2013, so that was 5 years ago. I think it began in 2012, give or take. And it was just a small group of game developers, and I believe it was heralded by a Microsoft employee, one of the games evangelists there, and then one of the games evangelists at Microsoft. And then then it started, they got a community manager, started posting on meetup.com, and then more and more people started to come. Monthly demo nights started being held, at a meeting room in Microsoft. And then, so these demo nights started being held at Microsoft, where, local indie developers could have a place to showcase their work, talk to one another. So I started coming to play crafting. I became a regular there. I went to as many meetings as I could. I couldn't go to GDC. I couldn't go to any demo nights. I was just too tired from working 70 some odd days in a row. And then I went to a meeting that summer, and after I had become like a regular there. And so this guy Rohit Krasta, he's a really cool dude. He was heading the Boston chapter, actually, yeah, because play crafting was like already starting to like merge into like Boston and some other cities. It was still pretty young at the time. But like Ro was managing both New York and Boston at the time, before Dan Butchko, the CEO, eventually came on and really like grew it into this big company. Ro was managing things at the time, and just said, I told him what happened. Actually, I remember that day very well. I had been busting my ass since April looking for a new job. I turned in over 500 applications. So the guy Ro was managing the Boston and New York branches, and then I had all this trouble finding a job, and I was like freaking out what was going to happen. But then I just like decided not to go back to the financial industry, because I just said I don't want to. I was like, because usually in I don't know how it works in the UK, but in America, with the way the tax season cycle runs, is that usually in like the summertime, no one's hiring between like April to June, which just makes it like even harder. And then they usually don't start picking up people till September. And so I'm like, all right, I have enough savings like to last me at least till like the end of the year. But like, shit, what am I going to do in the meantime? I went to a play crafting meeting that night. I told Ro what happened. And I said, this is my sign. It's time to go. And then Ro pulled me aside and said, hey, look, all this stuff like about business and taxes and everything. He's like, well, I know like I can't offer you a job, but how about you come teach for us? And as they say, the rest is history. If that hadn't happened, I probably would not be here right now.
Yeah, fantastic. And
started,
you've actually
yeah.
written a book about for independent developers on taxes.
Yes, I did.
Which is a great thing to do. It's a rarely touched on aspect. And can I ask a question on that? I mean, in the UK, we get video games tax relief, where the government basically allows us tax breaks so that we can make demos to then land a proper deal. And I know that Canada offer the same thing.
Yeah.
France offer the same thing. What about the US? What is the situation there?
We don't really have like a federal thing for that. In fact, if you've been paying attention to the news lately, yeah, our trash fire administration is actually like blaming video games for all of our fucked up gun violence problems. That's also a whole other podcast right there. Whole other thing right there. Yeah. No, the games industry does not get the love from the US government that other governments tend to give to the gaming industry. Like, they don't like roll out the red carpet like they do in Canada. There's some state level benefits that game developers often qualify for. Like, usually they're in the form of research and development credits, because game development can be can fall under that umbrella depending on what it is that you do. If you're developing any technology as opposed to just games. There's also sometimes art incentives that your game may qualify for. There's all kinds of interesting stuff about this. Like, I talked about R&D credits actually on Gama Sutra, because to put like the US R&D credits, like the federal one in a nutshell, most indie developers are not going to qualify. And it's like not like a grant program or something, where you'll get the money to do it. Like, you have to have enough taxable income in order to get that relief. And it's also non-refundable at the federal level, which means that, like, let's say like you owe $5,000 in taxes, you get this like $3,000 like R&D credit, then you just only pay $2,000 taxes. You're not going to get that money back to make a game. And so I face palmed all these pieces I saw on Gama Sutra that, like, yeah, these accountants wrote them, though, yeah, with these bigger studios in mind. Like, they're trying, like they were clearly thirsting for the business of a company like EA or like Activision, where yeah, they have, you know, very complicated billing, very complicated tax structure, or even like, you know, a company like the size of like Telltale or something, you know, or like what's known as the AAA sector. I'm thinking of your average broke ass indie developer like making a game out of spit and staples in their apartment. Someone has to actually explain how all this works, because you people are doing such a shitty job at it. So that's what prompted me to write that book, because there's just like so many tax resources that do such a terrible job at explaining things like taxes. And then something that used to frustrate the bejesus out of me when I was still practicing full time is like whenever like we would go to like continuing education conferences, like have these like other like theoretical you know, like things where like the IRS will put out like a publication, you know, about you know, because they do that for explaining tax law, you know, they're an authoritative resource, but all the examples that they always give them, like, you're not talking about real life here where people don't have these like neatly kept records of like everything you're describing. I'm like, no, someone's got to talk about this from the viewpoint of people who need help with record keeping. They don't know what records to keep. Doing your taxes is about more than just, oh, I spent this, I earned that. No, it's a lot more complicated. There's so much more that goes into it. The tax code, and I mean, in America at least, I can't really speak for the UK, but in America, it's extremely complex. I'm not gonna lie to you, a lot of it is completely bought legislation, which is a whole, I mean, our indictment of that is once again a whole other topic, but a lot of it is completely bought legislation. It's largely used for social engineering. And it's just that, no, while there's a lot of things that game devs can benefit from in our tax code the way that it is, no, like we need help navigating it. And then I just noticed that there was like a complete dearth of resources that the average indie developer could actually use, because it's not just, once again, it's more than just, oh, I made this and I spent this. It's lifestyle. How many people are full-time indie developers? How many people just contribute their services to working on a game? How many of you are looking for outside investment or already getting outside investment? Like I said, like how entrepreneurship is not a monolith, it's the same thing here when it comes to indie developers and taxes. Like not everyone is going to have the same situation. It's not always a cut and dry thing. And the fact, no, for instance, because while having a job while you work on the game did not work out for me, it does work out for a lot of people. I'm not going to fault them for that, but they need to know how that affects their taxes, especially in the light of this 2018 reform, which has also dramatically changed the way that you're going to be able to like report, you know, your earnings and your spent, you know, and how much you're investing in your dev costs. If you are going indie and still working a job on top of it, a lot of things drastically change, which I'll plug my Gama Sutra piece again. I have a piece up that I wrote about how the 2018 tax reform is largely going to affect us. I'm going to be doing an update probably later this year because I'm going to be attending the nationwide tax forum in Chicago this summer. And hopefully by then there's going to be more guidance about this stuff because holy crap, it is such a mess right now and we need clarification. A lot of tax professionals are having like conflicting opinions on some of these things that changed. There was stuff I had to go back and fix several times because I interpreted it one way. Some of my peers, you know, interpreted other ways, like the death of the entertainment deduction, for instance. Like I thought it included meals. Other people said no. IRS still has yet to issue a ruling on this. Like, yeah, it is a mess. So I'm going to be doing an update later this year. I will also be publishing an updated version of my book. It is overdue for it as it is, but with the way everything just changed this year, I'm going to have to now. So later this year, yeah, so keep a lookout. If you already bought a copy of my book, don't worry, you'll get the updated version. But yeah.
Thank you. That's triggered another question in me, actually.
Sure.
When you were at Himalaya, you were managing production and managing the finances.
Yeah.
Is that where you learned about the balance between the creative and the commercial? Does that
That's
inform what you do?
that's pretty much like, just like what seemed like a natural fit. No, because I really wanted to make games, but someone has to take care of all the business stuff, and so that just felt to me because that's what I spent 8 years in school for, and that's what I wanted to put it towards instead of having my talents sucked up at some financial firm that would just chew me up and spit me out. And I think the answer is the question.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I mean, I know, like for myself, learning about milestone slippage and, you can lose your whole profit, in a few months.
Oh God, I'm not gonna lie. Like I made a lot of mistakes there too. Scope creep is definitely a thing. Feature creep. Oh God, I'm kind of like falling victim to that again with my own game, Clam Chowder Hope Run. But the fact that I've had to just keep like stopping and starting development on it so many times has helped keep that in check. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really does have to be managed. So to jump back into networking again. So now I'm a developer. I've been practicing talking to people. I'm building authentic relationships. I've been to playcrafting or similar. And now I decide, okay, I'm going to go to GDC. I'm not getting any tax breaks, so I'm going to have to go out into the real world and find a publisher and find relationships. Do you have a specific approach for networking at game convention?
So GDC is kind of like its own vacuum. Like that's a game convention on steroids. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like it is kind of like its own separate vacuum. I mean, so like advice for GDC in particular, and this does apply to other game conventions, is to once again just be authentic, just talk to people. The vibe at GDC is a lot different than it is other game conventions. Because keep in mind, it's about like literally 15 to 20,000 people swarming downtown San Francisco, making it into this whole like summer camp for game developers. It's very much acceptable to go up to somebody on the street with the GDC badge, whip out your phone or your laptop and just say, hey, want to see what I'm working on? And that actually works. I had like so many like random people come up to me like outside of Moscow and just pulling out their laptop, like, hey, want to see what I'm working on? And then everyone's like, yeah, I want to see what I'm working on too. Or like you just ask what you do. You sit down at one of like the tables in the convention center. Either you're just getting a moment's rest, or you do want to work on something, and like I've actually just like started so many things because like I needed to rest my feet for a couple minutes. Like this guy sits down next to me and starts like, I shit you not, eating clam chowder and talking about getting it stuck in his beard and saving it for later. I immediately pulled out my sketchbook and I'm like, I'm making a game about this. I used whiteout for the clam chowder chunks in this dude's beard in my mock-up sketch. And then we just started bullshitting for like 20 minutes about the games that we're working on. And no, like that was it's just genuine. I said, you're just having a very genuine conversation. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel awkward. It doesn't feel like anyone is trying to sell each other anything. You're just there to like legit meet people. And that's that. And so that is one thing that does apply to any convention, whether it's GDC, East Coast Game Dev Con, PAX, anything small and local you have going on. One thing that I think is pretty universal is that, so while it may not be as like open and like in your face as GDC, these other conventions, one thing I think is a good rule of thumb though, aside from just talking to people, being authentic, is, you have to like just basically go in there and, like be open to whatever may happen. You don't know how an interaction with somebody is going to go. and you don't necessarily judge the success of that networking attempt or that convention itself by how many business cards you got or how many people you spoke with. It's about the depth of those interactions. Because no, like every year when I go to GDC, I have people, who I wind up actually forming these like relationships with, because like we immediately clicked, or we started talking and then we like reconnected over email or on social media, or we saw each other at other events. And then there's other people who like where we just met, we traded cards, and then that was that. And that's totally fine. You're gonna get that at any event. So print lots of cards, or print lots of stickers, other swag you're having made, and just be prepared to take that risk. You're planting seeds. You don't know which one of those seeds is like gonna grow at all, or how high it's gonna grow. You don't know whether you're gonna get like, these little buds or this big ass sunflower. You won't know until you start planting. So you gotta get out there and do that. And so I would definitely, just take the risk, do that planting, so to speak. But then you also never know what your interaction with that person is gonna be, what it's gonna lead to. And then you also said, like, don't judge by how many cards you got, how many cards you gave out, but judge by the depth of that interaction. And then follow up with people. That's the other thing too. Like one thing, when I went to career services all those years ago looking for help finding a job when I was still a college student, was that one thing that guy didn't get right was that a lot of people screw up the follow-up process. And if there is somebody who you legit want to follow up with because they were offering you a gig, or they're working on something really cool that like you want to stay on top of, like, hey, it's motivating as fuck to find out that somebody really wants to follow what you're working on. So like have an infrastructure for that, like have a Twitter page or a Facebook page, have a mailing list, better yet, all these things, like have a means for people to stay on top of what you're working on, have, build that kind of infrastructure. You definitely want to have that. There's a lot of like free tools you can use for that, like MailChimp. I mean, having like a basic, social account is free. Like have a means and an infrastructure to stay in touch with people. That's a big one. Figure out how you want to stay in touch, and like maybe what your reason is for staying in touch. Like maybe it doesn't, once again, it doesn't have to be work related. It could just be because they were wearing like a cool band shirt or something, and you're like, holy crap, no one else I know knows this band. Like, hey, if there's a punk show in your area or something, like we got to hang out at that. Like that's how you freaking do it. That's how you freaking do it. And then it took me a while like to realize this, because of like, all that stuff I had drilled in my head about networking. So now I've made it my mission to tell other people like, hey, you've been doing networking wrong because you were taught wrong. Like you don't sound all like stiff, formal, or like your only purpose for this is professional. No, because when you're coming from that like very authentic place, that's definitely what's gonna work more for you, both in the short term and the long term.
Yeah, thank you. You answered that really well. I mean, do you have a specific time frame for following up with people? How often do you contact them?
It depends. Honestly, like I don't have like a formula for this, to tell the truth. Because it depends on the depth of the interaction, depends also on if there's anything like timely. Is this something immediate? Like, no, because like I remember there was somebody I met at GDC last year who actually did express like a more urgent need for my type of services, and so I immediately reached out like a week after GDC. GDC is particularly intense. You do want to give a little more time before you like approach a prospect after GDC is over. Case in point, I'm taking off like 5 days when I get back, because it's so intense preparing for it, going, then schlepping back across the country. It is a process. So you want to respect, people's time and energy. That's one thing. Smaller conventions, I think it's more acceptable to like do this in a couple of days if it's a little more urgent. but I would still say that like a few days to a week is still a good time frame for like most events. And you just don't overcomplicate it. Just like email them or hit them up if they followed you like on Twitter or something the day you met. Just say like, just send a quick direct message like saying, hey, it was great to meet at this event. You know, like that game you're working on like looks really cool, or you know, or oh, like your art is gorgeous. You know, like hey, maybe we can work together someday. If you're in the market for an artist, for example, or we had so much fun shooting the shit about Star Trek all night. Like whatever, like something that like shows like you remember them, or that like why your interaction with them was also memorable.
Yeah.
I always get the messages about, oh, I had so much fun listening to your ranting about toads. Like, because most people, yeah, just like don't talk about toads, but I could talk about toads all day long.
Yes, yeah, and you even have Toad stickers, and I'd like to come on to that in a minute. Can I ask
Oh, sure.
one more question about you know,
Of
being at
course.
a convention? You know, I've been to many conventions, you know, from E3, GDC to the smaller ones, and you know, the publishers are always very open to speak to independent developers, and that's because they never know when your next hit is coming. So you might not have something today, but you might have something they really want tomorrow, and they're always on the lookout for new stuff. But they're also very busy, and they get approached the whole time, and they have back-to-back, wall-to-wall meetings all throughout the show, and a tremendous amount of follow-up, as you say, when they get back. So how would you advise a young independent developer or a new independent developer to be prepared? You know, how should they approach the publishers there?
That's a good question. That's what I'm honestly not sure if I'm equipped to answer, because it has been years since I approached a publisher, to be honest. Especially since like I'm not looking for a publisher right now. I don't know anyone who currently is. Um, for a publisher, I mean, yeah, it's a different dynamic than when you're talking to your peers, because it's like, well, it's not a one-to-one replica of, you know, like you're looking for a job, you're talking to a potential employer. It's a similar dynamic in that the publisher has that power of, like they have the funding, you want to get some of that funding. How are you going to come off as not being thirsty? But just because I also do want to get into publishing myself, like in due time. I remember, like Nicola asked about the rumor that I'll be starting a fund. That's on my agenda. That is on my agenda. So thinking as someone who does want to pursue publishing, one thing I would want to prepare an indie developer for, and just looking back at some of the stuff that I've done with Himalaya in this regard, that would be, to like have something prepared that shows you're doing something completely different that like hasn't been done before. Or if you're looking to go for a more risk-averse publisher, show that you've done your homework on the business end of things, because, it always gets ignored for one. And it also showing them that like you've got, a head for, for finance or for project management, shows that you're also thinking ahead. And because I know that like that was actually something that like did get publishers a little more interested in us in the past, which once again, I don't think this has like changed a whole lot in the last like 5-6 years. But showing that like you're doing something different, because like they don't want to see like the same like indie game concept that's been done to death. No, like you gotta like show you're ahead of the game with the business. Oh, a big one too. If you have some kind of audience already, that's also something that's going to really impress a publisher. If you've already gotten people signing up for your mailing list, do you have a lot of followers, on social media? Mailing list is a little more powerful because someone who gives you their email is a whole lot more likely to give you their money than someone who just follows you on Twitter, gives you a like on Facebook. And while those social counts are more public proof of what you can do and like who's interested. Keep in mind they'll also be like, you know, running checks, like how many of those followers are bots, how many of them are real. And you can also have 10,000 Twitter followers that won't give a shit what you're doing. And that's not going to get you as far as like 2,000 to 3,000 who are hanging on your every word. That is something I can say from someone who, well, I get a lot of opportunities from my random shit posting on Twitter. Like people say, don't spend so much time on social media. Dude, that's how I've met friends, gotten contacts. Yeah, it can be a double-edged sword, but if you just have like a studio account, which is not very shit posty, you have a studio account, you're getting a lot of engagement, you got people following it. That also is something that's going to also, you know, to impress a publisher more than, oh, hey, we didn't bother starting a Twitter account yet. Because no, you also do need to get on marketing your game a lot earlier than you know, you did before. And there's a lot of like indies I see make this mistake where they don't do any marketing at all. That's also, yeah, a whole other topic, but yeah, if you show the publisher that you've already like started to do some like fan base gathering, you've already like, got people interested in putting their money down, that's going to get their attention. Because I know that like that's definitely what opened a lot of doors for publishers to talk to us, and that, you know, I was able to readily cite, oh, hey, Himalaya got over 3,000 people to give us some money on Kickstarter. We have over like, you know, 13,000 people on the mailing list. Like that got publishing execs to pay attention. So that's also something you do want to bring to the table.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that, you know, I love it when you know, I ask an additional question sometimes and then you give me a gem, you know, really wonderful. Thank you for that.
No problem.
So let's get to toad stickers and swag in general, because I know you think it's important, and I know that you run around with the toad stickers, and that you've seen a return on investment in that. So please tell us all about that.
So that's an interesting like way to approach it, return on investment, because it's not like, you know, say like a digital marketing campaign, like a social or an email campaign, where you can see like what that ROI is for the most part. With like something like swag, it's a lot like a billboard or like a magazine advertisement. Like you might see a spike you can assume was like related to that one thing, yeah, like getting that magazine or like this one particular event maybe. But swag is also like a long game as well, just like networking, in that a business card is something a little more immediate, because a lot of people think about trading cards. You want a card that's cool, memorable, has your up-to-date contact information, and that's something that's like a little more immediate. But having other swag made is also a part of a long game. It's part of a branding strategy. And that's, so like I have these like cool toad stickers made. They were modeled after my late toad, Yael, may she rest in peace. She was a good toad. She was the model for my logo. And so I had those, so I wanted to make these like really cool, like high quality stickers I could like give out to people, and put them up in places. And, you know, that like, basically, yeah, it was like they're bright, they get your attention, they make people want to see like, oh, what's this whole Sonic Toad thing about? And so I started putting them up in places where I figured that like game developers and creative professionals, or like my other demographic, yeah, like disgruntled professional sector workers who want to have a creative or career or become a free agent at whatever it is they do, but they don't know where to start. So I started hitting up those types of spaces. Like I have like a desk I rent at a co-working space in Flatiron sometimes. I started putting up like stickers there. I would like give them out to other people, you know, like, and I was like, you know, like working at like a desk there, and then I would just be like, oh, hey, I see a lot of cool stickers on your laptop, would you like another one? Because it never hurts to give them out. I had a couple thousand of those printed. And then I started also, yeah, just like putting them up in various parts of the city. I give out like 10 or 20 to other people, like I meet at playcrafting and game conventions. And I'm like, here, have fun with this, put it on your laptop, put it up in your co-working space, deface some public property with it, whatever. Let's get these toads everywhere. And then it allowed them to, so like how much it takes off or what return on investment it is like a little difficult to track. But I don't know, a lot of people like actually have said like, oh, I saw your toad sticker like at this place, or oh, I know I saw that toad somewhere at somebody's on someone's laptop. Like it was like some guy when I was in San Diego actually for business last year, it was like he said, yeah, I was in Chicago and saw that toad. I'm like, hey, my toads are going everywhere. The toads are going all over the place, and that's good. That's what I want to see.
You work with people to help to get their elevator pitch succinct and punchy.
Yep.
What other positioning needs to be done on social media, websites, etc.?
Well, the first thing I think is the most important is you definitely need to secure your own domain, both for your game and for your studio. Because yeah, if you're trying to get publisher money, especially, you have to show that you're invested. And just having, like a website, whether it's like your studio's name, .wix.com or .wordpress.com, it's a start, but you really need to show that you have your own domain. It just looks a lot better for branding purposes. So you definitely want to have, like your own, domain name for the game, for your studio, because if you don't, it just gives the impression that you're a hobbyist and not a professional. And that may be fine if you are a hobbyist, or if you're just like speculating on, on being a game developer, you don't really intend to make a living off of this to some degree. But if you do want to get publisher money, you have to have your own domain name. That's like really a must. You need to have your own domain name for the game, for your studio. As for social traction, like social media is like one of those things that like there's some people who live and die by it, and others who just have social pages because they have to. It certainly only helps your case to start building up a following there.
In addition to domain names, what else do professional indies need?
Yeah, a logo. You need a good looking logo, something memorable, something that like really speaks to like the image you're trying to put out there. And because I think I mentioned, I got into it last time about, brand cohesion, that like something that got people to like really think about Sonic Toad was the fact that, my logo was just like one big green toad, and I've had many variations on it. Like I have like a purple version, I've got the toad warts all over stuff, a certain typeface, that I use. And so you kind of have to do the same thing like with your studio's branding, like in a sense, in that you want to have like some kind of symbol, some kind of typeface that is going to stand out, that people are going to remember. You're not making a logo for a law firm here. You got to have like something that's going to, be like, hey, this is like standing out from other game studios out there. This is something, that really speaks to us. And same thing too for like the logo of your own game. Like if you go on Gama Sutra, for instance, like you can find entire articles actually like dedicated to what your app icon should look like, what your logo, tips for designing a game logo. Because it actually is all a very important part of branding. It's a creative expression for sure, but you also want to, show that once again, you've invested the time and or money into doing this. And that's something that's definitely going to get a publisher's attention, because, hey, the publisher wants to make money. Clearly you want to make some kind of money if you're going to them. And so showing that, that you took the initiative on this is extremely helpful.
Yeah, thank you. And what about positioning on social media? How should you come across and make yourself visible?
So I've gotten like some weird questions about this in the past, and there's some people who also like don't like what I've done socially. because that's the thing. Social media is a little more flash in the pan. I maybe should have just made a separate one for Sonic Toad by now. I never bothered to. Please do this if you haven't started on social yet. I just like don't see the point. I'm too far gone. I don't see the point in making a separate one for now. Maybe I will in the future, but yeah, if I had gotten a jump on this earlier, maybe I could have. But no, because I am very loud. I'm very sweary, very political, and I get that some people don't like that. There's some people who use social media just for very like more what I like to call like the arm's length kind of purpose. Like, oh, I just want to find out about an update on this game, or like have content shared. I'm very shit posty, and that works for me. That may not work for you. A publisher may not find that very amusing. But then you also have like these brands that actually like do things like interact with people, start Twitter feuds. Like if you spend way too much time on that garbage website like I do, you observe these things, like the fact that like the moon pie cookies or something, like they have this whole like cult following on Twitter because they just like spout off totally random shit. And they snark on the people who write to the account. Like there was this hysterical one about like some guy who was actually complaining about this, like saying, hey, I like moon pies as much as the next person, but like, why do you guys like, shit post like this? Why are you giving relationship advice to a total stranger? And then the person responded, dude, you're the one writing to a marshmallow cookie, on a Saturday night. What the hell are you doing? And that actually has seriously taken off for them. So you never know. I mean, social media is kind of amorphous in that sense. Like there's no, as they say, there's no rules in love and war. There are no rules when it comes to shit posting. Like there really just isn't. And so so there's actually like, that's one way you really can take off with it, by just going off the beaten path like that. If you want to go the more like tried and true path, the first thing you have to do is start following the accounts about the followers that you want to get, and you actually have to just engage with people, like because that's the thing, like people just don't want to see the same old updates, or there's like the screenshot Saturday tag, the indie dev tag, and so on. That's perfect for starting, but to really like get that kind of following that's going to be fans opposed to followers, you have to really engage with them. Like that means like responding, to stuff that like your fans are putting up, even if it's just like a picture of their pets or something funny that they're sharing. Like you still have to show that there's like a person behind that account. It's not just like some other like soulless brand account. And I think that's kind of why the guerrilla strategies that like you've seen these like huge brands take on, like for instance, in my vein of political Twitter, the Steakum account is another one that took off like the Moon Pie account did. Yeah, like that's just some examples of going off like the beaten path. And there's some people who feel that maybe it's like kind of like a moral gray area for a brand, to do this, like, because hey, it's still ultimately they're latching onto some kind of ideology and like ultimately to sell a product. Here's the thing, like you need to have a way to reach out to people. Social can be a very effective way to do it. Some developers live and die by those social media followings, but it isn't the only path. But nonetheless, at least get those pages started. Show you're making some kind of effort. There's always room to grow them later, because I've seen like plenty of very like established or successful developers who just don't have a very heavy social presence, because their following and their money is really coming from the email marketing, or it's coming from live events, it's coming from from like Twitch streams. So it's one method, it's not the only one.
Thank you. That was very thorough. I appreciate that. So moving on, I've got a topic here of sales meetings and meeting with the publishers and investors. So let's say our networking has gone well, and we have a sales meeting, and how do we prepare for that? How do you prepare for a meeting? What kind of things do you do?
So obviously you want to rehearse what you're going to say. You really need to like drive home the points that's going to get that, that investor, that decision maker within the publisher to want to give you money. I mean, unfortunately, this is where you have to like separate yourself from your art. I know this is the hard part that sucks, but but you really actually need to show that like you literally invested your blood, sweat, and tears in this. You need to have like some kind of proof that like you put your own, I know I don't really like the term, but I got to use it here, that you put your own like sweat equity into this, because that's the thing. Because like, why would the publisher or the investor give you money if you're not gonna put your own ass on the line? That's just how it works. Because I know that like logic would dictate, hey, like I don't have enough of my own funds, that's why I'm going to them. Like, hey, they have all this money, they can take the risk. I know, but unfortunately, if you want to go that path, you have to show that you took the risk, and then if anybody else invested in you, even if like your mom gave you a loan, that counts. Like just be like, hey, well, this is what we started, with like our own funds, and then the friends, family, and full stage is what's considered next, followed by fans. Like if you had any kind of success with crowdfunding, whether you raised enough like to get the game to a certain point, or or even if you failed in your campaign but you still generated like a significant amount of interest. I was reading a piece on Gama Sutra a while ago about one developer who actually had an investor come on board because he saw a failed Kickstarter that this team did, because like they raised something, I think like $80,000. Well, they didn't raise it, because the campaign failed, but the campaign had generated like about like $80,000 from I think like 4,000 people, and that was enough to get this investor interested. And then they approached them like a year later and gave them like $200,000 to turn it more into a platform kind of deal in the game. Because that also is one thing too, if you want to go the investor route opposed to a publisher, because like publishers are definitely more interested, in what you can do for, making a game, maybe making future titles with them, or possibly doing, doing work for hire. But an investor wants to see like, at least, 10 to 50 times their investment in a relatively short time frame, and they're going to own part of your company. And so it's pretty fucking serious. If you want to make that kind of move, that's like where you really need to think, I said, like in terms of the long game, like not just like this particular title, this particular game, or a franchise, if you're going to be building a franchise. But yeah, think of franchises like as like the baby step, but then also like, can we do some kind of platform sort of deal? Can we design something like that? Because that's going to get most investors more interested than just like the game in and of itself. But you still never know. There are some it's like investors in this industry who do know the quirks of the game business. But like if you go the platform route, you can open up like your investor dating pool, so to speak, if you're going to go that way. Yeah, but when you go those meetings, you still need to have like some kind of tractable proof though that you've invested in your own product, in your own brand, because that's just the first step you have to take before you'll get them to even consider parting with their money. Because if you don't believe in your own game, well, why the hell would they? Why are they going to put money on you if you're not even going to put your own funding in? I mean, once again, you don't have to be totally rich to do this. If it was just like a couple $100 you paid an artist, or you paid a web designer to get things going, because hey, you might be a broke ass student and that could be all you can afford, whatever the case is, as long as you like put some kind of investment, shows that you have like plenty of skin in the game, that's what's going to get like a publisher or investor to pay more attention. And that is definitely a step, but I think a lot of like indies unfortunately tend to not think about. Just because an unfortunate reality of capitalism is that that's just the way that the whole inequity is wrought. You know, like they have all the money, they can take all the risk, but you still have to show that you took some risk yourself before you'll get them to consider you.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that when you have these face-to-face meetings, that body language is important. How do you read that? How do you tell when you've got a green light? How do you know when publishers are interested?
Well, one thing I would definitely pay attention to is posture, eye contact, because I definitely can tell if somebody is very disinterested during a pitch. Is like if they're basically darting their eyes around, like they're already looking like they're kind of bored. Yeah, you're not gonna. I don't think you're gonna get the funding. If they're paying close attention though to both what you're showing them, what you're saying, you can usually you see that their eyes look a lot brighter and more alert. You can see from facial expressions, if because I've also seen so many those phony smiles before, saying, oh yeah, we'll be in touch. You can usually tell when a smile is genuine. And then you also have to pay. I mean, so I'm a New Yorker. I talk with my hands a lot, and I don't realize it until I leave this place, and then someone's like, oh my God, why is that woman always talking with her hands? I just things like that. You have to also pay attention to for little regional quirks like that, for lack of better word. So do a little research, on where your investor or publisher is also from. Pay close attention to those kinds of customs, especially if you're American, you're going to work with a European or an Asian publisher or investor. You also want to look up how body language and communication quirks vary between regions. That's also something that's going to be extremely helpful to you, because I didn't realize that some people may consider hand talking to either be rude or to be or to be a testament of just passion, which is true. I've definitely seen other people just do hand talking when they're really getting into something. And so that's also something you do want to look out for as well. And then it's someone who's also standing up straight or at attention is more likely to be finding what you're talking about to be more riveting than someone who's just slouching through the meeting, and they kind of clearly don't want to be there. And so one thing that really just helps with picking up on these kinds of cues is just, like I mentioned in my article, you just got to get out and talk to people. Just make observations, when you're out in random spaces. I know it sounds stupid and innocuous, but I just do it all the time. When I'm on the bus, when I'm at a coffee shop. One place that's really fun to people watch is go to IKEA. Laugh all you want. I can get a cheap ass meal there and stable Wi-Fi. And if you go at 2:00 on a Tuesday, it is it's empty. It's totally empty. If you have the IKEA family card, you get free tea and coffee. By the way, IKEA is not paying me to hawk this on the show, but I'm just saying it's something to consider if you have one in your area. I mean, don't go on a weekend. I mean, that sounds like living hell. But if you have one, just go during the week. It's a nice place to work, get a cheap meal, free coffee. And I've always observed some interesting stuff going on. I watch couples argue over furniture. And you got families trying to corral little kids together. And I could always tell who is really excited to move someplace new, and who's oh my God, just buy a couch and let's get the hell out of here already. It's always interesting observing all those behaviors, and that's the thing. So I know that there's some indie devs who are just no, stay home, buckle down on that game, don't go out. No, you gotta like get out in the world, because you never know what kind of like random occurrence is going to inspire you and end up in a game. That's how Clam Chowder Hub Run was born, by my riding the bus all the time. And that's a story for another time. I don't think there's enough time on the show to fit in the clam chowder story, but
No,
that
but
all
perhaps if
started.
you have a link, we could give it to our audience.
Yeah, clamchowderhubrun.com and thechowderbucket.com are my two sites. Yeah, they both just right at the time of interviewing, they just have a coming soon thing up, but they're going to be live like probably in a few days. So they'll definitely be live by the time this airs.
Do you do any research on your prospective people before you meet up with them?
Absolutely. You want to know everything about them that you can humanly possibly, I mean, yeah, everything about them that you can find that's humanly possible. Some of that will be very public information, which they may tell you on like their own website, like what kind of games they published or what kind of companies they've invested in. You also want to do your behind the scenes talk to people at events, lurk on game forums, find out whatever you can, especially if you know a dev team who also successfully got funding through this particular person or group of people. You certainly want to talk to them and find out what they did, what to say, what to avoid, what factors they're really looking for when they're deciding what people and intellectual property they want to invest in. You definitely, the more research you can arm yourself with, the better, especially if you can find something out about a game, that they got behind, and you can say, and so for instance, like you may find that like there's a game that they invested in that did very well, and then the developer wrote something about it, on Gama Sutra, and then you can say, you can pull that research because it's first it's going to show you did your homework for one, and they definitely want someone who does their homework versus someone who's just going to take the money and phone it in. But shows you done your homework to be like, hey, well, I bet that well, hey, we can definitely get this kind of traction on social because we have X amount of followers, or we have like this many people on the mailing list, or oh, like, look at all this feedback we got at this at this convention. So you definitely want to like have as much proof you can show. You don't want to overwhelm them with this. Just like how a resume isn't every single job you ever worked, like that meeting is also not every single thing your studio has accomplished to date. It's just a matter of like picking out the most like relevant points that are most likely to impress them and make them want to invest in you.
Thank you. I got one final question. Could you give us like, 3 pieces of advice or 3 guidelines to up and coming indies to get the most out of networking?
So the first thing that like I really want to push, like, which is just the most important, it's the simplest, but the most important, is just talk to people. I know it sounds like, oh gee, Captain Obvious, like why say just talk to people? No, just talk to people, because the biggest mistake a lot of people make when it comes to networking is that like they tend to just get like super anxious about it. Like think about how like if you have like a date with somebody and you're kind of on the spot, you're like, oh god, I don't want to say the wrong things, I'm going to make a complete ass of myself, or what if they don't like this thing that I'm into? Like you're already making this like huge ass investment and you haven't even had coffee yet. And so it's kind of the same thing with networking. Like you don't know what this person can do for you or what you can do for them. You have no idea. You have no idea like what each other can offer just yet. And you're already like getting like so nervous. And I know that the dynamic is a little different when you're trying to get a job opposed to you're in a position like mine where you want to get clients, you want to get prospects. I know it's like a different dynamic, especially since I'm not going to lie to you, there is, you know, and I haven't been in this position in years, but when I was in that position of, oh, you just network when you need a job, that's the thing. Like, I think it's the biggest mistake I ever made, because there's a second point I want to make that, like, compounds on just talk to people. It's that networking is also a continuous process. It's not just about, because you see, what you're taught in college, especially about networking, you know, is that it's a very transactional kind of view, like, oh, you're just talking to people in the hopes that you can go get a job with this company, or that this networking event is going to lead to a job interview or maybe an offer if they really need somebody. Fuck that. Get rid of that transactional view. It's time to rethink it completely. You have to think of networking as a continuous process where you're not making, you know, yeah, like contact with people who can give you a job. Like, don't think of it that way. You have to think of networking as just, you know, you're looking to expand your world. You're looking to possibly make new friends, make contacts, make colleagues. That's how you have to see it, because like some of the examples I gave last time, you know, yeah, like where I met the guy who was the, you know, insurance agent, and you know, like that's the thing that's great about interactions like that, is that we weren't thirsty for each other's business, but then, you know, I was able to answer some questions for him, and then when I needed help with, you know, an insurance question that I had, I would much rather, yeah, like hit up the guy who I had this nice conversation with, who was clearly not thirsty, however you want to define in that sense. Whereas, like, if I called up the guy who sold me my policy, he's just going to try to sell me a frickin' another one, or get me to pay more for the same damn insurance, and no thank you. So that's the thing. Like, you got to think of it as, like, you're just meeting people you can share knowledge with, who you can help each other, and, you know, you're building your world, basically. You're building, like, you're expanding your world of people. So these people, as I said, may become a significant part of your life, of your professional life. Others may just be like someone who, like, you'll say hi to once a year at GDC or something. Either way, it puts you on other people's radars. It puts them on your radar. No, because I've had people, you know, who I've met at something, and then 2 years later, they'll just say, oh yeah, you need help with this particular matter. Go talk to Rachel, the toad lady. She can help you, you know, get this problem solved. And that's what you got to do. That's how you got to do it. It's a continuous process. It's not just this transactional view of, I'm going to this event because I need to network. You have to, like, get out of that mindset. And then, so the third point I had to make is, in light of those two things I just mentioned, don't come off as thirsty. But when it comes to the people making these, like, you know, hiring decisions, like, they sadly don't want to hear that, though. Like, they want to know what you can do for the studio, or in the case of, you know, of like a free agents like myself, you know, what kind of problems can you solve? And that's, like, how you got to do it, honestly, for both a job or for a gig. Like, hey, we have a lot of game artists out there. We have, you know, programmers are dime a dozen. What are you a fucking rock star at? Like, what problem can you solve that studios frequently had trouble with? Or that if you're just going to be, you know, on contract, on project basis, or people like me, it's just a one-time, like, 2 or 3 hour engagement. Well, why would they want to take you on? Once again, like, what problem are you uniquely positioned to solve? So with that said, you definitely don't want to come off as thirsty, or if you're a free agent like myself, you don't want to come off as a hard sell, because people do not like the feeling that they're being sold to. They don't like it. I don't think anybody does.
Yeah.
So you got to just basically talk about what you've done, And if you're not that confident in what you've done yet, it's like if you're younger, if you're newer at this, because the two are not necessarily mutually exclusive. There's a couple devs who got started later in life. But if you're not that confident in what you've done yet, you at least need to show passion about what you're doing. And then if not, passion about game making, just passion about other things. Like, I could talk about toads all day long. I am a batshit toad lady. I have a tattoo of my toad. There she is. May she rest in peace. Yael was a fantastic amphibian. I miss her a lot. And I am a batshit crazy toad lady, and I chew people's ears off about amphibian biology, and that's actually gotten me work, believe it or not. When you're out there in meat space, it doesn't have that same it doesn't have to. People just get it, in their heads that it does, but it doesn't have to have that same pretense. And then when you're working with the communities and more in your personal life, I said, yeah, your stuff you do for fun, stuff you do, like I said, if you're religious, or if you do charity work, or if you do anything for your community, just your friend circle you hang out with, all that, I mean, is actually, yeah, networking is not just putting on a suit, getting business cards, you awkwardly stand around this room exchanging it. No, it's just getting out there, talking to people. You don't have that kind of pretense that something like that LinkedIn invite comes with. You don't have that pretense, and so it leaves you freer to just say whatever, and then you actually can see if you would click with this person working together. Because I've had that happen, yeah, so many different things I've gone to, or just, yeah, random shit, hanging out in coffee shops or what have you. Someone will be chatting with me, and I can kind of get a read of their personality to see if we would work well together. Because I've just met other people in media through these random things like this, and then we start talking, and then we're both making each other laugh like crazy. We're both talking about where we are in our careers, where we want to go, and then just about our see if we have any common interests, see if we have any cool stories to tell each other. I've made pretty good friends just doing that, and then you never know if that friend knows somebody in search of your talents, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's how you do it.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. And thank you so much, Rachel. You've given us so much material here, and really covered the topic thoroughly.
Awesome.